When I first caught wind of a Pinocchio Souls-like, I assumed it would be some garbage joke game that everyone would laugh at. I'm thinking of that Winnie the Pooh horror movie that came out this year that everyone hated. Lies of P is not that. This is a game that clearly had immense passion and talent behind it, and it is absolutely worth talking about. This game has received high praise from a variety of trusted sources, including from a friend of mine who is perhaps an even bigger Souls fan than me, if you can imagine. It's been hailed as the best Souls-like ever made, with some even likening its quality to that of FromSoft themselves. Quite a bold statement. Today, I'd like to go over my experience with the game and answer as to whether or not I think the game lives up to the quality of actual Souls games. Here are my honest thoughts on Lies of P. There won't be any story spoilers, but I will be showing some areas and bosses from the mid to late game. I'd recommend playing the game first for yourself if you care about that sort of thing. As for my thoughts on the story, real quick, I thought it was alright. Much easier to follow than a Souls game, and there were a few moments that I thought worked pretty well, but it's just that, moments. I'd be lying if I said I was engaged throughout the entire narrative. That's fine though, I play these games almost exclusively for the gameplay. If you've played a Soulsborne before, you know what to expect. R1 and R2 for light and heavy attacks, parry with L1 a la Sekiro, corpse runs, boss fights, weapon scaling, it's a Souls-like. The posture system from Sekiro appears here in some fashion, but it works a bit differently. Staggering an enemy with parries won't outright kill them, but you can riposte for heavy damage. Parrying is something you're expected to do regularly, but it's not emphasized to the extent found in Sekiro. I'll speak more about the ins and outs of combat once we get to boss fights. As for unique mechanics, we have a few. Fable Arts. It's a special attack tied to your weapon that builds as you attack enemies and as you land perfect guards. You've also got your Legion Arm, which is another customizable attack, usually long range. I really like how this game handles ranged attacks. I used the Falconized Legion Arm, and it was great for my playstyle. It can deal large amounts of damage from a distance, however, its limitations never made it feel unbalanced. It has a long charge-up animation, and I only got 3 shots per life. I had to be strategic about when I used it. I honestly wish ranged attacks were handled more like this in future Souls games. This game's biggest new mechanic is weapon assembly. Most weapons have a blade and handle that can be separated and mixed and matched with each other. This allows players to get their desired Fable arts and scaling. There are many viable weapon combinations, which will likely make each player's journey their own. This is great, I like this system, but it could have been better. You do have to make sure that the weapon you create has the appropriate scaling for your build, and you also have to match damage types, slash versus stab, which severely limits the amount of viable options. The game also doesn't give you a ton of weapons early on, so you might be waiting for a while before you get a combination that you'd actually want to use. I wish the weapon pool was larger in the early game. Also, for whatever reason, you can't separate blades and handles for boss weapons, and I'm not really sure why. I only used 2 of my own weapon assemblies for any significant length of time. I used the Dancer Blade plus Booster Glaive for a good chunk of the game. That charged R2 is just nasty. I also used the City Spear on a dagger handle towards the end of the game. The quick stab hits for disgusting amounts of damage for how fast and cheap it is. It was satisfying to discover these combinations, don't get me wrong, I just wish there were more viable options. Then there's the P organ. I still can't believe that this is the name that made it into the final release of the game. Lewdness aside, this is actually a really good progression system. You use quartz to unlock a wealth of passive perks. These can be anything from more healing, extra amulets, this game's version of rings, and some of them can even significantly affect how the game is played. It gives you something to look forward to for the entire game. Quartz is always satisfying to find, so level exploration is always encouraged. Lies of P also makes some small quality of life changes to the formula. For instance, if you lose your souls to a boss, they will spawn back outside of the arena. I can't tell you how many times I've died just trying to get my souls during a boss fight. I've become so desensitized to it that a lot of the time I don't even bother trying to retrieve them. I just take the L. It's that bad. But Lies of P provides a solution. Also, I really like the mechanic of being able to earn healing if you run out by dealing enough damage. It means that no boss attempt is truly hopeless, and it can change the entire dynamic of the fight sometimes. You can also see exactly how much ergo you'll get from a crystal, so no more guesswork in that department. These little changes prove that this game isn't just a cynical attempt at capitalizing on a formula that's known to work. It's actively trying to make improvements to what's been established, and it did not go unnoticed. Also, this game has the absolute coolest sliding down ladder animation I've ever seen in my life. Props to NeoWiz for getting me to praise something so mundane. Now, let's talk about what's sure to be on any Souls player's mind: boss fights. Lies of P's boss design is very impressive. Souls games are famous for having some of the highest quality boss fights in the entire industry, and this game's fights more than uphold that standard. One thing that Lies of P nails that many developers often don't is the level of readability in the attack animations. Lies of P and FromSoft might just be the only two to get it right. Here's what I mean. Oftentimes, the animations are detailed enough that you can use clues in the enemy's movement to figure out the correct timing. Take the Scrapped Watchman for instance. Before he does a sweep with his left arm, he moves forward a little. So if I press the parry button right when he moves his legs, I'll get the correct timing. There are things like this everywhere that help make the learning process so much more enjoyable. Each encounter is like a puzzle that you solve slowly but surely. There are 3 responses that you can have to enemy attacks: dodging, guarding, and parrying. Each action has its benefits and drawbacks. Guarding requires the least effort, and doing it lets you recover the HP you lost, similar to Bloodborne's rally system. Dodging is reliable as always for avoiding damage, the timing not being as strict as parrying, and for repositioning yourself. Parrying is the riskiest response, but it yields the highest reward in the form of stagger damage. The timing is brutal, but very learnable. Learning which response is correct for each and every attack is the key to success in Lies of P. If you're fighting a boss that has a huge punishing combo, it's probably not worth the risk to try parrying all of it. Instead, you should probably dodge. As long as you have at least a few attacks that you can consistently parry, you should be able to build enough stagger damage for a riposte anyways. This process was incredibly rewarding to me. The game forced me to sit down and learn each boss to the point where I felt like I had truly mastered each and every encounter. This game will have you feeling like, I am a golden god! Many times. Lies of P nails the fun but fair, challenging yet rewarding aspect of Souls combat. Most of the time. I'm not really a fan of the Gank Rabbit Brotherhood, and there are a few lapses in balance later into the game. I might get more into this at a later date, but I still feel very positively about the boss design. The visual design of these bosses is top-notch as well. Each fight looks distinct and creative. The game's also not afraid to get a little grotesque on occasion, which is something I greatly appreciate.
This is fucking disgusting. It's disgusting. You're disgusting.
If you haven't guessed already, Lies of P is absolutely ruthless when it comes to difficulty in bosses. Be prepared to spend up to 3 hours on a single fight. Yes, some of them did actually take me that long, and this is coming from someone who's beaten every FromSoft game. Not every fight is that hard, but they're still overall more difficult than what's found in FromSoft games. Maybe it's because games like Elden Ring and Sekiro have desensitized me to the idea of spending hours on a boss, but I really didn't mind getting stuck. In fact, getting stuck on a boss was the best part of the game for me. So, as long as you don't mind getting stuck, I think Souls veterans will generally enjoy Lies of P's difficulty. Everything that I'm describing might sound like heaven to a fan of Souls-likes, and I would really like to call this game a masterpiece, but there's a catch, and unfortunately it's a pretty big one. It's the level design. I guess my central issue with Lies of P's level design is that it feels like an approximation of Souls level design while not quite achieving the heights set by those games, and not really adding anything new to the table. The rest of this video will mostly be dedicated to me going over my problems with Lies of P's mostly underwhelming levels, and I'll be making extensive comparisons to the Souls series to illustrate this point. Given how much inspiration this game takes from those games, I think it's warranted. Most of the levels use different shades of brown and gray, and it all blends together and it looks super washed out. This is Pinocchio, for fuck's sake. Where's the color? I know the tone they're going for is darker than a Disney movie, but that's no excuse for such a muted color palette. I guess the counter argument would be that the lack of color adds to the dark atmosphere, but I don't really find this game to be atmospheric at all, so the slew of brown and gray areas did nothing for me. Lies of P also reuses the city theme quite extensively. The first couple levels are city levels, okay, then later on you get the shittier looking city level. Then right after that there's another city level. After the halfway point you get the arcade and following level, which are pretty much city levels. Then after the swamp you get literally the same city level as the starting area, just with some poison mist and different enemies. That's excessive. You could argue that Bloodborne also reused its city theme, and you might be right, but not only are the environments much more detailed and colorful, the game also offers unique mechanics and set pieces to go along with it. For example, Old Yarnum has a dude with a Gatling gun, Yargul has the laser shooting amygdalas, bell ladies, and teleporters in the second half. I'll get more into unique level mechanics in a bit. I know talking about aesthetics might seem superficial to some of you, but a good aesthetic can really go a long way to making something unique and memorable. The only levels that stood out to me aesthetically were the Opera House and some parts of the Cathedral. Now let's talk about checkpoints. This might be a contentious point, I'm not really sure what the consensus is, but here we go. The checkpoints are very merciful. There was never a point where I even remotely felt starved for a stargazer, this game's bonfires. A lot of people point to overcoming a difficult boss fight as one of the most satisfying feelings to have in these games, but overcoming a difficult level can be rewarding as well. The sparse checkpoints in FromSoft games help achieve this feeling. You have to learn these levels so that you have enough healing to survive until the next bonfire. In Lies of P, there's hardly any satisfaction in reaching the next Stargazer or shortcut because of how close together they all are. Each segment never took me more than a few tries, with the only exception being when I was facing a new enemy type. There's a reason why bonfires are such a universally understood icon of the Souls series. They feel amazing to find. You fought long and hard, so here's your reward. I should stress that less checkpoints and nothing else would probably make the game worse in its current state due to it putting more time between the amazing bosses and the mediocre levels. It would have to be accompanied by other changes. And while I'm talking about difficulty, I do want to at least mention how the levels don't really do a good job of preparing you for the brutal boss fights. This wasn't a huge issue for me, since I don't really mind being stuck on a boss, but it might be for some other players. And also we have lack of originality and unique mechanics. Many of these levels just amount to rooms full of enemies. I guess you could reduce any Souls level to that description, but From usually do a good job of keeping things interesting. Even some of the shittiest levels in Souls history have unique mechanics. Fair and Keep. Sure, it's a poison swamp, but the whole finding 3 flames thing is unique. No other level does this. Lies of P either forgoes unique mechanics completely or takes them directly from other Souls games. Boulders rolling downhill, Sen's Fortress, ranged enemies on rafters, and Orlando. Exploding red barrels? Come on, are we really that starved for ideas? I was going to say that these disruption crystals were some of the only unique mechanics, but nope, Dark Souls 2 did this with the Shaded Woods. The only unique mechanic I can think of is the poison mist that goes away when you hit these things. This is cool, it adds another layer to combat, but they're underutilized. There's 2 optional sections in the area where they're introduced, then once more in the final level, and that's it. Taking level ideas from Souls might not have been so bad, but Lies of P doesn't develop them to nearly the extent as they were in the original games. Remember the boulders? In Sen's Fortress, the boulders are a threat in multiple sections of the level, and they're even used to reveal secret areas. Here, in the Cathedral, you have this one section, then you do it again for an optional collectible, and that's it. I'm not saying that every level has to have a unique mechanic, but they do have to have something. Canehurst Castle, for instance, doesn't have any unique mechanics, However, it features all unique enemies, and the aesthetic is drastically different from anything else in the game. The levels do have a degree of interconnectivity, which is appreciated, but it doesn't really serve much of a purpose most of the time. Like, most of the shortcuts you unlock are completely useless. You're only going to use the one that goes to the boss. One of the most disappointing levels was the factory level early on. We've never had a factory level in a Souls game before. The setting doesn't really allow for it. Given this, I'm shocked at how little they did with the idea. Not only is this level downright ugly to look at, it doesn't have any unique mechanics. Sure, it does loop around on itself, which is something, but it ultimately doesn't amount to anything more than rooms full of enemies. We could have been fighting enemies on conveyor belts, dodging all kinds of machinery. I don't know, it's just an idea. That leads me to a broader point about the game as a whole. The more modern, technological setting could have lent its way to any number of unique level ideas, but NeoWiz are content to just copy off of From Software. Look, I don't mind how this game takes its combat, leveling, entire structure from Souls, that's fine. But level ideas too? When you had the opportunity to create something original? Sorry, but that's just a little too far for me. There are only 3 levels in Lies of P that I would say are really solid. The Cathedral, the Opera House, and the final level. Still, I feel like there's room for improvement in all 3 of these. Let's talk about the Cathedral first. I've already said my piece about the boulders and rafters, but this is a pretty good vertical level. I like the giant wheel that's used as a shortcut, and I wish it was taken further. Maybe have another area on top of this with the wheel running throughout the whole thing. I might be asking a bit too much though. Next, the Opera House. It's bright, colorful, and it features all unique enemies. This is absolutely one of the best levels in the game, but it's way too short with a huge chunk of it being optional. Now, the final level. I like how massive this area is with great verticality, and the enemy variety is astounding. My big sticking point is the underutilized traps. These things that push you off the ledge are used a couple times and never again, and the falling spike traps are used once for an optional collectible and never again. If these ideas were developed more throughout the level, it would be a masterpiece in level design. The next tier of levels are ones that have some neat ideas but are ultimately rather forgettable. The Barren Swamp falls under this category. I think everyone would have been just fine if NeoWiz decided not to include a contractual poison swamp, but hey, I actually kind of enjoyed the encounter with this puppet from the future while getting shot at with arrows. You can position yourself so that the arrows hit the boss instead of you, and that's kind of cool. But poison, rickety wooden platforms and bridges, come on, this is just Blight Town, with none of the atmosphere, aka the best thing about Blight Town. I'll give points to the arcade for actually being kind of intricate with all the locked doors and keys, but this area is much smaller than it seems at first, squandering its potential. Rosa Isabella Street is little more than another city level, but the area with all the flamethrower guys was interesting at least. Lastly, we have the filler levels, areas that offer little to no substance. Moonlight Town, Path of the Pilgrim, Malum District, and the preceding level all have dull aesthetics, no unique enemies, no unique mechanics, nothing. All of these could be cut from the game completely and it would be better for it. Now let's talk briefly about world design, or lack thereof in this case. This game is very linear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a game being linear, it's just that games in this style invite comparisons to FromSoft. Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and to a lesser extent Bloodborne all have incredibly compelling game worlds. I know it's hard to balance having solid combat and level design, but I really want more developers to try to make a world like Dark Souls 1 sometime. This isn't so much a criticism of Lies of P, just something that Souls games have over it. It's not like the levels are joyless. There are some interesting enemies and mini-bosses on top of good enemy variety. However, there is a lot of missed potential, and it's a glaring weakness in a game that's otherwise incredibly polished. And it's the stronger aspects that make the level's lack of creativity stand out all the more. Don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying that Lies of P as a whole is uncreative. There are other aspects of this game that are brimming with creativity. I just wish that was extended to the level design. Now you could say that my expectations are a little too high, Lies of P's levels aren't necessarily bad, it's just that they feel like a watered down version of something that already exists. It might not be so bad if other aspects of the game weren't so similar to the Soul series. But since this game is so much like the Soul series, I can't help but make comparisons. With this degree of imitation, the shortcomings are all the more apparent. For all my complaining, keep in mind that Lies of P is still one of the best games I've played all year. It features some of the most satisfying combat I've ever experienced. It's especially impressive that such a small team was able to create something so high quality. Lies of P is certainly one of the best Souls-likes out there, but there's plenty of room for improvement that I hope gets addressed with the future DLC and with future games from NeoWiz. I'm excited to see what comes next. Thanks for watching. If you want to see my video where I rank all the Souls games, I'll have that linked here. And if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. Also, be sure to let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I said in the video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.